Welcome to our customer panel discussion about the modern data stack. Joining us for today's session is Jonathan Rankin, Product Manager, Data Design and Data Tech at The Guardian, Pete Williams, Director of Data and Online at Penguin Random House UK, Donas Rashedi, Head of Data Intelligence and Technology at Douglas. And now a warm welcome to your host, Niamh O'Brien, Solution Architect at Fivetran.
Thanks, Alexa. Yeah, so I'm a solution architect here at Fivetran. Prior to joining Fivetran, I was working in data analytics consulting with companies across Europe who are really striving to be data-driven, but were struggling to get the answers that they actually needed from their data. So I actually found myself spending less time on analytics and more on a data architecture and strategy that would enable analytics that businesses could actually trust. And a strategy and architecture that has been successful for many organizations, and indeed is obviously the topic we'll be discussing today with our panelists, is the modern data stack. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists and also kind of scratch beneath the surface of their job titles and see what do they actually do on a daily basis, and maybe something that's interesting that their company has done with data in the past. So Pete, maybe if we could kick off with yourself.
Yeah, morning. So, thank you for introducing me, Director of Data and Online. So, responsibilities are primarily around the online platforms, website platforms, and then the thing that really matters today for this conversation, data. So, data warehousing, some of the analytics, the engineering, and the stack that allows us to achieve those. I guess if I was to look backwards, I've got quite a legacy of more years I'd like to remember in the data industry, a lot of it around retail and loyalty, and then recently moving into the publishing industry the last couple of years, and really facing into a significant upgrade into the stack that we're implementing today from where we were before. I've been at Penguin Random House UK for 2 years now, just over 2 years. So this is, I think, a whole new data strategy for how we want to use data, and then how we bring that to the organization to solve problems and find opportunities. Things that the organization has done that would, I guess, be a landmark thing, like you're kind of asking there. I think actually a lot of our energy for the last couple of years has been focused on integration, ensuring that Penguin and Random House join as a singular company into one way of working and getting onto a core backbone of standard operational systems. So I think for a period of time, the energy has really been there rather than into the space that I think we're really talking about here, which is how do you drive value out of those systems? I think everybody in the audience probably understands that operational systems provide the source data, but I think the real magic of opportunity comes from when you combine those sources, and we haven't really had the time to sit down and work out how we would do that optimally. So it's really been focused around the traditional work of BI, keeping the company informed on its decision making, but not really being able to go too deep onto the opportunities. And I think that's what's really coming to life now. We started this journey in January this year, actual implementation work after the long sales job of the strategy that I'm sure most people here have been through. And I think if I was to talk about one thing that I think is remarkable, it's the speed at which things can be achieved now compared to how they were achieved last time I tried to do this a few years ago in previous organization. And I'm sure that's what we're going to get into in the conversation today.
Absolutely, sounds like a very exciting time for you guys at Penguin Random House, which is great. And Jonas, maybe over to you.
Yeah, my name is Jonas. I'm head of data at Douglas, Europe's biggest beauty retailer. Within Douglas, I'm responsible for the data collection, as Pete said, so data collection, preparation, the central reporting, and the analysis behind them. And yeah, before Douglas, I worked as a consultant for many years in the data field. And currently, I'm writing my second book about data and data organizations.
Looking forward to tapping into that knowledge later. Johnny, over to you.
Hi, I'm Johnny. I'm a data product manager at The Guardian. I've been at The Guardian my whole career, starting out as a software engineer on probably one of the more data-driven teams at The Guardian, the contributions team. So if you've ever been to The Guardian and been asked to donate money, that was my fault. So after 3.5 years on that team, I moved into data and I became the product manager for data tech and data design. So data tech is the team that looks after the platform, and over the past 18 months, we've been migrating to what we would call a modern data stack. And then data design is the team that works on that platform that focuses on designing and building the data assets that power people and products to make better decisions faster. So I guess as part of that, we're thinking about building data sets that are suitable for self-serve business intelligence, and also really like trying to power the drive for high quality, well-governed data so that we can scale up the access to that data in a safe way. So that's me.
Super, thanks all. We might stay with you then, Johnny, just to kind of talk about, obviously we talk about the modern data stack and stack as technology, but it's all really around the business need. So we have a modern data stack to be able to enable X, Y, and Z. So at The Guardian, was there like a moment that you really said, okay, in order to be able to actually facilitate the business here, we're going to need to change something?
Yeah, so I think the thing that really kicked it off was, The Guardian has a huge number of ways that people can support The Guardian, lots of different products that you can purchase. And we can answer simple questions about our supporter base, such as how many unique subscribers do we have, or what's the average churn rate across all of our products. So we had, different products with different data sets, in maybe even in different clouds, all with different formats, different standards. So to answer these sorts of questions, it required an analyst with access to lots of different systems to query, run 6 different queries, pull that together and do lots of dedupeing and stuff like that. So we realized that we really needed to build like a kind of holistic view of our consumer base. And we realized that the stack that we had just wasn't conducive to that. We had, data ingestion was slow because we were relying on developers to always to be writing custom ingestions. Data modeling itself was slow because we had a Hadoop-based data lake, and we really wanted to move to like a kind of modern cutting-edge data warehouse so that we could get the benefits of being able to iterate really fast when modeling a SQL. So yeah, I suppose like that kind of core ability to understand our user base was really the business decision that kind of kicked all this off.
Yeah, I'd say that's resonating with a lot of people in the audience, I can imagine, and definitely with myself as well. And I know, look, we're going to talk about the future and what's to come and what we'd like to change about the data industry. But Jonas, if we could just step back in time, I think you always need a bit of retrospective when you're looking at the future as well. If we could just go back to maybe like 3 years ago, what worked well in a decision that you made in relation to your stack, and maybe what's something that you would change if you had a time machine that could go back?
Yeah, interesting question. I think what I definitely would try is to make sure that the most points are automated. I think that the current situation is that is not that we don't like to get employees, but I think the market is very difficult to find the right ones, right? Current situation is they all want home office, they all want to be very flexible, and I think that's very hard for us. And the modern data stack which we are currently facing, for sure with Fivetran, is that we could automate a lot of things and ensure that we could focus on recruiting on the right people, on the special people in special points, or or one person could handle Fivetran instead of having one team lead handling 4 data engineers to ensure that we get the right data, that we don't need to set up agile process to get the data. I think that's very flexible to have a automation based on that. That's the most point, in my opinion. I think that's the most pain point currently in my daily work, that we don't find the right people in the right positions. So what I would recommend myself is make sure all things are automated in the best way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I know you're probably being very humble there, Jonas, but was there anything that you thought actually went well, and that you would like to do again if you had the chance to go back?
Yeah, I think using ETL or ELT process is amazing within Fivetran. That went well for sure. I know that's here the Fivetran event, but that's for sure. That's why I'm here, and that's great. What went not well is that we didn't start with the easy process. So like an MVP, we thought we could do a big bang. So we thought we could just build all new, have a big process, IT project for 3 years. And after 2 years, we thought, okay, it makes no sense to make a big bang instead of starting with the MVP, having small pieces done, showing the lighthouses we built within the MVP, and then going forward. That was not good. And so don't do a big bang.
Great advice. And Pete, you were nodding along there. Is that resonating with some of your previous experience yourself?
I think that last point, start small, scale quickly. That's always my philosophy. I've made almost every mistake that you can make, I think, in the data industry, in terms of trying to sell the pitch, implement the platform, get people on the journey, produce, customer-focused output. So yeah, definitely something I've learned is start small, minimize your investment, keep under the radar, I think is one of the things that I like to do until you've got something that people can really buy into, and then, sell like crazy in inverted terms inside your organization with the collateral you built from a successful implementation of something, a strategic problem you've solved that somebody cares about enough to shout amongst their colleagues and peers that, this is the way to do something, and maybe you should get on the train as well. And I've been in that situation, and I've been in the place where I couldn't scale quickly because either my infrastructure wasn't in place, my licensing model wasn't appropriate, I didn't have the budget at the time, and then all of a sudden you've got that tricky balance where you're trying to build expectation, generate excitement and passion, and really I guess start the wave that should crash over the organization around the desire for data, balanced against what you can actually deliver at the time. And it's a fine line. It's a really hard thing to achieve. I know even now, when I say that I've learned the lessons of the past, I still get criticized for over-promising. But I think if you don't get somebody excited about what you're doing, they won't be on the journey with you. So the great thing I think about is what we've learned this year using this concept of the modern data stack and using these connected tools is that you can scale quickly. And in the past, the scale was sometimes, we've solved one business use case. If you give us a number of more developers or buy a bigger platform or do something that involved a great deal of money or lots of implementation effort, then that was always a hurdle. I think the hurdles are much less now because, assuming that you're connected and you're using pre-built connectors, then for many of the systems that you'll be using throughout the organization where you're wanting to bring another source in to add more richness and context to your decision making, then you're going to be able to get to that quickly. It won't be find a team with the right skills, understand how to penetrate something like the impenetrable SAP data layer to try and get out the information you need. You'll be able to get the stuff you want quickly, and therefore you'll be able to service that demand quickly, and hopefully people won't leave you, as in won't leave the journey that you're on, and they'll be interested in staying with you, and you'll be able to bring value quickly. And value is what keeps data teams going. If you're just a hog for money, that people are just sinking in and they're never getting payback, then they're not going to be on the journey with you. So I think that last point, and the big bang thing, that just, there's too much risk and there's too much trouble. I'm always in favor of building something parallel or something totally new. Depends what it is you're trying to replace in the organization. So I would definitely echo Jonas's thoughts there.
Great. And Johnny, any thoughts on the big bang?
Well, I suppose like what I was thinking, as you were both speaking there, is like kind of the importance, and maybe I would say this as a data product manager, but the importance of kind of treating your data as a product. Like all the benefits of running your team as as a product team, thinking about, short feedback loops, agile delivery, MVPs. I think another thing there is like getting the consumers of your data involved as early as possible so that they feel like they're part of the process, and not kind of building in a silo and then releasing after 6 months of development. And then they go, well, this isn't what we wanted. So yeah, I think like, I think treating your data as a product is like is a really important thing, and something that, you know, we've started doing at the Guardian over the past like couple of years. I think, like, kind of going back to the original question, like, you know, looking back like a few years ago, and what we've done well, and what maybe we could have done better. You know, I think maybe even going back more than 3 years, but like neglecting data governance was a big one, really. I think because when we started this project, you know, we kind of inherited, like, I mean, it's called a data lake. You know, I sometimes think of it as like a data swamp, because there was so much data, you know, undocumented, no definitions, no owners. And, you know, we've taken on this process now and trying to really take data governance seriously, but it just really devalues your data if people can't access it and understand what it means at, you know, at the click of a button, and check the data quality status of a table, or find out even who to go to talk to about a piece of data. So I think, like, the early, you know, really thinking about data governance and taking it seriously is something which I think, you know, if we'd done that 5 years ago, then all of this would be a lot easier.
Yeah, 100% agree. And maybe that leads on to one of the next topics we wanted to cover, which was, you know, if you could kind of step back from the immediacy of your role and, you know, ignore for a moment all of the interdependencies we always have to think about, and detach yourself a little bit from reality. Like, if you had a wish for something that would change in the data industry, is it around that data governance piece, or is there anything else, Johnny, on that?
I suppose like another thing, like I wish, and maybe this is like less just on like data departments, but more on companies as a whole, is you know, to really have data literacy as a key requirement for, you know, for more roles in the organization. I think, you know, like too often, you know, lots of people that I talk to in this industry kind of say the same thing, that, you know, that there is a real challenge that, you know, people that you think naturally should kind of have data literacy skills maybe weren't hired with that in mind. So then it's a bit of an uphill struggle to, you know, train them up and try and get them thinking in a, you know, in the right kind of way, and be able to use the data that you're building. So yeah, I think like organizations as a whole should value data literacy more in a wider range of roles.
Can I just jump in there, because I think that's such an important subject. I mean, data literacy is what gives you license to operate as a data organization. I think without you know, people who can interpret the information you're providing, make quick business decisions on that, and drive value, then you're not going to get anywhere. And unless they can ask the right questions in the first place, then you won't have anything to work on. It'll all be, you know, the sort of the data guy says this, but really quite often there's a perception that the data guy doesn't really know the business operation, and they're just pushing their own agenda and something that's a bit esoteric and really not that useful. But it's one of the hardest things to crack, because, you know, it goes to be really deep on it, the educational standards of the people you've employed, and how they've come into the organization, how they're comfortable they feel, the type of roles they're doing, some of which don't feel related to that, to the use of data, but there are very few decisions you'll make inside an organization that aren't related to data. And then, you know, surely who picks up the bill? Because quite a lot of my experience has been that people sometimes pay for training from within their own functions, and sometimes this is an organization-wide initiative, so it goes much bigger than something that sometimes you can actually get a lot of input to, and you need to convince more people that this is a wholesale change you need to make. One of my previous employers, you know, we started that, we built a small data science program, and that's now gone on to be something really huge, which is great to see. But I think, you know, you're absolutely right, Jonathan, that the data literacy piece is enormous and one of the hardest ones to crack, I think.
Yeah, and Jonas, you already mentioned about employees and modernization of the workforce. Any thoughts to share on that piece that the guys were talking about?
Yeah, thanks. I thought what we should do is a bit focus on data ethics as well. I think we have so much data, and so many companies are working with so much data, so we need to think about how we should handle data, and think about ourselves and our own data, our own privacy data, to think about. That should be a point too, to say, okay, let's handle the data how you think you would like to have that your data have to be handled.
Yeah, 100%. As Johnny was kind of saying earlier, data is kind of a product, yep. Right? So you need to treat it as so. Sorry, Johnny, were you going to hop in there, or?
I just saw there was a live question around what do we mean about data literacy, but I don't want to derail the conversation if we're talking about.
Go for it. Yeah, what do you mean by data literacy, and what are the skills that are needed?
Yeah, I think the kind of base skills of being able to take data that's given to you, whether that's like in a graph or in a spreadsheet, and be able to interpret that, and then also to be able to answer the right questions. So I think as part of the interview process for hiring, that there are some data analysis competency questions that that you could expect to be like a base level to kind of work in the organization. So that's kind of what I mean by data literacy, I suppose. It's not necessarily about being able to write SQL, or it's more about being able to understand data when it's presented to you.
It's one of the subjects that isn't so well covered. I'm going to do a shameless plug here. My current nighttime reading, Be Data Literate. I think there are a few books that tackle data literacy as opposed to here's a framework for how to bring data to your business, or here's a big transformation strategy. Really trying to understand what skills people need inside an organization is a bit more of a challenge, because to Johnny's point there, you don't want everybody to be a technician, but everybody should feel confident with the level of analysis they need to produce in their role, which could just be confidently handling the data they're presented and being able to say, I need to take decision X. It could be something you need to go deeper and provide analysis for somebody else. Or it could be somebody right at the top of the organization where you're looking at an overall steer and need to get some sort of trend-based thing or understand an opportunity. So it's not a blanket coverall that everybody needs the same level of literacy, but everybody needs some literacy, and people really need to get that matrix understood of, by role, what sort of analysis that do you need to provide to people in the organization, because we don't want to scare them all away by saying everybody has to be deep into this, but everybody has to have a level of comfort with this. Otherwise, the information you provide isn't going to be used.
Yeah, totally agree. And we actually have another live question, which is, in implementing a stack or a big data implementation, have you tried to measure the real impact of that stack? And if so, what things did you measure? So maybe Jonas, you could give that one a go.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and we could answer it in an easy way. I think that the easiest way is to summarize the manual effort for reports and communicate and compare the effort for the manual reports to when we do the automatization. So that's the easy one. Otherwise, as I already said, and Pete said the same, is that don't think about a big bang. Don't think directly about machine learning, AI, and stuff like that. Think about the easy stuff, like the low-hanging fruits, manual reports, how you could optimize the visualization. Oh, come on, like with a Tableau or MicroStrategy or whatever, and then you will see that based on that and on the Pareto principle, take the 80%, optimize those, and then you could have the 20% after that for ML and AI and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's a really great question, and I'm thinking, like when I've tried to display the, present the value of the work we've been doing to stakeholders, I've always tried to use practical examples. So, it'd be like, we built this table now. That this report used to take one person 2 days a week to produce, and now it's instantaneous and it's updating every day. Or like we've just done a data ingestion in half a day, and previously this process would have taken 6 weeks. So I think it can be a difficult thing to measure. I suppose like the other thing as well, which I really like us to start looking at as well, is like maybe looking at the number of users of the end product as well. So let's say that you're building data for self-service dashboards. You can think of a metric like number of weekly active users on your data visualization tool, or something like that, as like a way of maybe the bigger picture, the whole stack. Trying to measure that value. But yeah, I think it's a really good question, and something that we should all be thinking of, especially if you're a data product manager.
At some point, the conversation will always come around to ROI. It's like, why am I paying you in this enormous stack? What are you contributing to the organization? And I think finding the right KPIs for your organization is important. If I reflect on one of the roles that I had, we had outsourced our stack basically to another organization, and the KPIs they were running to were to never hit capacity. because if it did, there might be a slowdown or a shutdown, and then there's penalty terms on them. So when we actually managed to get hold of the logs and start using them through our new visualization tool, we started to realize the stack was running at like 20% capacity. And so we were stopping people doing work because they were using a headroom of 80% in case there was a spike, as opposed to flipping it around and trying to really use the stack. And then as we tried to roll out more and more users of the visualization tool and try and get people to drive for better data-oriented questions that were really going to influence the organization, the spikes on the platform were huge. And then, this outsourced company was like managing that down and saying, no, we can't introduce more queries. But I think sometimes, just as you're saying there, Johnny, consumption of your platform is really important. If you're not getting more people using the products, either the data you put in, so ingesting more to cover more use cases, or the outputs where more people are consuming the visualizations or the data pipelines you've created into other tools, then you're probably wasting your time. So you've really got to structure your KPIs around what it is you were trying to originally solve, and then make sure you generate some visibility of those so that you can't face the challenge of shutdown, because you never want that, because data science can be an expensive operation, although it can start cheap. So you've really got to factor your KPIs around that. And I would say that making sure more people are using your platform is a really great place to start.
Yeah, engagement is really key for people to understand the actual value as well. No point in having dashboards that everyone in the business can't see and use and touch and feel. And I know we've talked about skills, data literacy, and those kind of changes that we would like to see in the industry. Is there anything else you would add to that, Pete? Any wishes, shopping list of wishes that you'd like to change the data industry overnight on?
I've got a couple of perhaps controversial thoughts. The first would be, I would like to see more positive data stories in the press. We get so many big scare stories around how big data's profiling you. I remember I was the subject of an article once where it kind of said, a certain company is using data to monitor your shopping expeditions and help you find the things you want. And I sat back and reflected on that, thinking that doesn't sound like a terrible thing. If I'm using my time in a shop more effectively and finding the products I want, that sounds like a positive. How can we spin that around rather than making that sound like a bad thing? And then, of course, we get back to 2016 and everything that's happened since then. So I'd like to see a few more positive data stories. And I think maybe the COVID stuff is an example of how data can be used really effectively to drive better outcomes for communities and populations around the world. So it's not all a bad thing, but helping people understand the value of their data, how it's going to be used and how it drives a positive outcome would be a really helpful thing from the industry. I think the other thing that, again, perhaps controversially, maybe I could just lock the door to the boardroom and stop consultants getting in there, because the number of times that I've faced a challenge from the top that says, what are we doing on AI? It's like, AI? You haven't even tackled data governance yet. You spend all week saying what's an accurate sales number, and now you want me to use the information you don't trust to drive automated decisions and perhaps drive the company into the toilet. I mean, where do you need to start? So perhaps, a little bit more engagement inside the organization with the data experts. And if you don't have a data expert, perhaps find one who's on your side rather than trying to sell stuff to you, and then build up from there. That's not to say that sometimes the momentum that comes from, this deep research isn't useful, but if it needs to be done in conjunction with the organization's ability to achieve that and the maturity journey it has to go on, rather than trying to jump way ahead of the curve and then fall backwards because it can't be achieved or it's totally unrealistic. And that's not where the value is going to be generated. Having a better understanding of your organization, what drives performance, the sort of lead and lag KPIs, and getting a really confident operational standard before you start trying to do something too data crazy is probably the way I would try and do that. So those would be my two wishes: more good news stories and a bigger set of bolts on the boardroom door.
Yeah, no, I think, there's no point in having an AI if you're feeding it incorrect data, and that's just irresponsible, really, to be honest. So I actually don't think that's a controversial point, and totally agree. Jonas, you were nodding away as well, and would love your thoughts on what you would like to potentially change in the data industry if the guys haven't covered all your wishes already.
Yeah, Pete said what I want to say, so it's like in the school. He said that what I want to answer. The most important point is to focus on the function and on the basic stuff instead of doing great and thinking about AI and ML. Think about how we could make the basics like documentation, data governance, data literacy, and then after a period of time, go ahead and build on the basics, build on the fundament, the next ideas like AI or ML. That could work, but let's focus on the easy stuff. I know that they always want to do fancy whatever, but at least I think it helps all of us if we focus on the basics.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We have a few more live questions coming in, but I did just want to get a few thoughts from yourselves about, what advice you might have for companies who are at the start, let's say, of modernization of their data architecture. So we'll try and quickly get through that from each of you, and then maybe come back to a couple of live questions. So Johnny, I might start with you. Any advice you'd have to a company starting out on that modernization?
I mean, I think kind of drawing on some things I've already touched upon before. I think, number one, data governance from the start. Number two, thinking of data as a product. Hire some product managers. Read some product books. That will help a lot. And I guess 3, get buy-in from the users as early as possible. Not just not just the end users, but also like stakeholders around the business, and really try and sell that vision and get everyone on board, because it's not always going to be a really quick process. Kind of depends on what you're doing, but if you're moving cloud data stacks, that's going to be quite a long, complicated process, and you're going to need to get really good business buy-in. So yeah, make sure you kind of sell it well.
Yeah, perfect. And I think we had a live question about that. How do you sell your data and your stack to organization? I think Johnny gave a great answer on that earlier when he was like, use those really concrete, practical examples that will resonate with the business users. Talk about operational efficiency that you'll gain, and give examples that they'll be able to understand. Jonas, any advice you'd give to other enterprise companies or companies starting off on their journey?
Yeah, I would do it with a 6-step process. Think about the status quo. I think that's the most important situation. Get where you are. Then think about the data strategy, how you want to use data and stuff like that. Then think about the organization model, like central, decentral, or hybrid model, like hub and spoke, for example. Then which processes and tools are needed to tackle the current situation. Then think about the basics, the data governance and data literacy and the documentation stuff, and then focus on people and culture. Talk to them, have meetings with them on a weekly basis, do workshops, enable the other people, the other employees to use the data instead of being the central department to use data and to collect data, use data, and to get the insights out of it. I think, as Johnny said, we should tackle data as a product, and we should provide the product to the other departments, and they have to use it for the insights.
And Pete, finally.
Advice for other companies, I would say don't delay. Get stuck in. This stuff, it isn't as hard as they make out. You can get started and it's quite easy, and you can add some value quite quickly. I think it's interesting when I pitch data literacy all the time, the one thing I would do in these conversations is ban the word data, because I don't want to confuse people. Everybody in the organization uses information to make a decision, uses insights to know what to do next. And I'd much rather start talking about what it is they need to be able to make decisions on and how they would do that, and then work on the data stack in the background. So I don't need to get them involved in what is a modern data stack, what's ELT versus ETL, what's cloud storage as opposed to on-site, on-prem stuff. Really, I don't need to do that for most of the organization. I do need to get inside their heads and show them that I understand the commercial decision-making processes, and that I understand how I could bring them something that would help them do that more effectively. So I think there's 2 streams there. One's the organizational engagement, getting into the decision-making processes and earning the trust of people. And the other is, how do I very quickly service the opportunities that come out of that conversation so that I can start the wheel turning. But I would say don't delay on this. Get off of your on-prem where you can, and get connected into the cloud, because I think you'll find the ability to do the next thing will be much easier for you and come much quicker than you would have achieved otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Just get started. We did have another question about data governance. I don't know, Pete, if you want to cover that off really quickly.
I think Johnny
yeah.
did a great pitch on data governance right at the start, but I just want to say I think this is a super important subject and one of the hardest things to get going. And I think really it's about rooting it into the objectives of the individuals in the organization. You know, finding the true data owners, which quite often are not necessarily in the organizational vertical. You know, just because a salesperson is interested in the information doesn't mean that sales should own that data if actually somebody else in the organization cares more about whether it's right and accurate. So having a proper conversation around who's a real data owner, what comes with a data owner and with data stewardship, and then tie that to their objective and strategic outcomes so that it's in their best interest and they truly understand how fixing this problem gives them a better opportunity to be successful. And I think if you can't tie it to that, if it just becomes keeping the system clean, being the data policeman, then you're not going to get anywhere. So I think this is all about tying it to commercial and strategic outcomes and your ability to make that string understood.
Great. Well, I think we're just up on time. It's been a super discussion. I've also really liked that you guys are all backing each other's points up. So we've got 3 data thought leadership from across different companies, all basically kind of saying similar things. So these are obviously like really important topics that everyone should definitely be taking into consideration. I hope the audience have enjoyed this. And I just want to thank Johnny, Pete, and Jonas once again for their time. It's been really good. And back to you, Alexa.
Thanks, Niamh.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Niamh, for hosting the session. Johnny, Jonas, and Pete, thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate all the insights you provided to everyone listening.